We are here with Mark Wrigley, and this studio is somewhat different to Karen Sherwood's, Mark.
A little bit, yes. Yes.
You have a physicist's background?
Yeah, so I trained as a physicist back in the 1970s, and I spent most of my career doing stuff, actually mainly with mobile phone technology.
Right.
And I retired about 7 years ago, and I'm now really interested in communicating science to people. And in fact, what I'd like to do is sort of enthuse people with science, and it's quite amusing. So I do stuff for the Institute of Physics, and if we put up a poster that says physics at a show, everybody runs away.
Right.
So we're trying to sort of get people saying, yeah, actually some of this stuff is really cool. And so we're looking at, I mean, the other ways of doing this is doing it in combination with the arts.
Yes.
And actually the other sort of group of people, sort of bit malign name at the moment, are makers, and particularly the sort of makers who are into building their own computers and all that sort of stuff, because they're doing some physics and they don't realise it. So so it's art, looking at how we communicate through the arts and through sort of the maker community.
That reminds me a bit of my perfume sort of exploits, because there's quite a lot of science in the perfumery that I make. And you try and engage people with the idea that it's a bit of engineering, it's a bit of chemistry, it's a bit of this, it's a bit of that, and it's just trying to get those people to really sort of engage with
absolutely.
it.
I mean,
so
I've been to a couple of your exhibitions.
Interesting.
This here is part of something called the 1201 Alarm project, so it's got its own little website. The reason I became a physicist was mainly due to the Apollo moon landings in the late 1960s. So up until then, I was a sort of average at school, not particularly academic. Had been advised that I should be a woodwork teacher, and then the Americans started landing on the moon, and I was absolutely grabbed by this. This was amazing, and part of it made me want to go and study physics. The other part of it made me want to record it all in some way.
Yeah.
So this is before even videotape recorders. There was no way of recording sound, and there was no way of recording pictures from television at home. So I started using my dad's reel-to-reel tape recorder to record the sound. I started taking stills from the TV screen, and eventually I got to the point where I borrowed his movie camera, which looked a bit like this one.
Yes.
Pointed it at the TV screen and filmed the Apollo moon landings. So 50 years later, so it's one of the longest projects I've ever done.
Yes.
50 years later, I've got this material, and I'm busy trying to digitize it so I can share it. And also it's going to be on exhibition at the National Science and Media Museum in Bradford as part of the celebration of the 50th anniversary of Apollo. What I've got here is actually an editing device. I'm really keen on going to car boot sales and junk shops where you can get this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And this helps you if you want to edit the film. So if you want to actually play it, it's all set up, and we can actually just turn this wheel and you'll actually see the material that I recorded. I can't see it from the standard.
I can make it out. You can see the film.
Yeah. So all this actually has already been sent off to a lab who have photographed every single frame in the film and then stitched it together in a movie. And I've actually got the JPEGs that they did frame by frame. So I'm going to actually use that in some photographic artwork as well. And
sounds fascinating.
So the other thing I used to do was the photographing stuff.
Yes.
This is something I made in 1969, around about April, and it celebrates Apollo 10. And so this is the stuff that I took directly from the TV screen. And it really sort of boosted my interest in photography, because back on the amount of pocket money I had then, the only way to do this would be to do your own prints. And I was fortunate enough that my father had a darkroom. So I started developing my own film, printing it, and eventually making it into this sort of book. So this is the one for Apollo 10, and I've got another one for 12.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the stuff that, and it's quite interesting. I suppose there's this sort of emotional side of this as well that's quite interesting, because as I play back, I mean, for example, I was playing back the tapes that I made from Apollo 11 and listening to what was happening as it was broadcast live.
Yes.
And it's a different place than what you see now, because what you see now is a compressed thing about 10 seconds long, and Neil Armstrong comes down the ladder. Back then it took them 2 hours to do a checklist to actually get out onto the moon after landing. And you get that whole thing coming back and you realise how pioneering it was and actually how dangerous it was.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, fantastic. So why, this is off a completely different subject to what we were talking about. But why Replicast Studios? Did you how did you come about this place?
Well, I think it's through networking. In fact, it's quite nice. I know about half the people who formed Replicast Studio beforehand, and so through networking, it was actually a discussion with Graham, who's the manager of Cupola Gallery, who told me that this was going on, and I got in touch with Jennifer Booth and found I could get a really nice affordable space here. And the other thing is, so I do stuff. I'm sort of semi-retired. I'd otherwise work at home, and I start shouting at the radio and things when I'm left alone.
Yes,
so it's really nice to come in here. It's a lovely atmosphere and they're lovely people here. So you can, in fact, we have a rule: you shut the door and you don't want to talk to people. If the door's open,
that's good.
Then come in and let's chat. So it's really good socially.
Yeah, it seems to be. It seems to be hugely diverse in the stuff that people are doing. Which is always quite exciting to see. And well, I hope you continue to prosper in here.
Thank you very much.
And thanks for your time.
Yeah.